My phone buzzed with a sharp vibration on the nightstand, breaking the silence of my bedroom. I had just finished ironing the navy blue dress I planned to wear to my son Ethan's wedding, a dress I had saved for and bought months ago, picturing myself standing proudly in the family photos. But the message I saw on the glowing screen was not congratulations, not a last-minute change of schedule. It was a betrayal so bizarre, so cruel, that I thought for a second I was dreaming. "Don't go to the wedding, run." The word stared at me from an unknown number, chilling me more than the autumn wind that rattled the window. My heart thudded hard against my chest. My first thought was that this was some kind of prank, maybe spam. But the second thought lodged deeper: whoever wrote that knew something I didn't. And something told me it had to do with Ethan's bride-to-be, Claire. Claire had always been sweet on the surface, polite enough when she wanted to be, but her eyes gave her away. There was calculation in them, like she was constantly measuring how much money she could wring from every situation. Over the last year, she had grown closer to me only when she needed help with something: wedding deposits, dress fittings, favors with vendors. I had paid for the rehearsal dinner without blinking because Ethan seemed so happy, and for months I swallowed the little slights she tossed my way, the way she corrected me in front of others, the way she pushed Ethan to side with her in every small disagreement. I told myself it was nerves, stress, the normal mess of planning a wedding. But that text planted a different seed. What if it wasn't stress? What if it was greed, plain and simple? The betrayal became clearer when I opened the envelope on my kitchen table, the one Claire had asked me to sign, as a little formality. She had slid it toward me weeks earlier, all smiles and charm, promising it was just paperwork to reserve a special suite for the wedding weekend. Something about the thickness of it made me hesitate, so I had left it unopened. Now, with that warning text still fresh on my phone, I tore it open. My hands trembled as my eyes scanned the bold legal lines. It wasn't about a hotel. It was about my house. A deed transfer. A sneaky attempt to move ownership of my home into Ethan and Claire's names after the wedding. My stomach turned. My own son's fiancée had plotted to rob me of the house my late husband and I had built with 30 years of sweat and sacrifice. The home where Ethan had taken his first steps, where birthdays had been celebrated, where my husband's ashes rested in a small urn on the mantel. And Ethan, had he known? Or was this entirely Claire's doing? My throat tightened at the possibility that my son might have been part of it. I pressed a hand to my chest to keep from crying. The text came again, another message, short and sharp: "If you go tomorrow, you won't come back." My phone slipped from my fingers onto the table. This wasn't just about greed anymore, it was a threat. Someone was warning me that my life might be in danger. My first instinct was to call Ethan, to demand the truth. But the words caught in my throat. If he was part of it, if he had chosen Claire over me, then calling him would only alert them that I knew. I sat there, the weight of 30 years of motherhood pressing against me. I had given everything for Ethan. After my husband passed away, I had worked double shifts to keep Ethan in school, paid off this very house penny by penny, gone without vacations and new clothes so he could have a future. Every sacrifice was for him. And now, on the eve of what should have been the happiest day of his life, and mine, my sacrifices were being twisted into a trap. I whispered to myself, if they think they can take everything, they have another thing coming. I wasn't the naive woman they thought I was. I had survived worse storms. This betrayal would not bury me. It would wake me up. But then the landline rang, my old phone I barely used anymore. I picked it up, expecting silence or a telemarketer, but a voice came through low and urgent. "Mrs. Parker, you don't know me, but I can't let you go to that wedding. Trust me, please. Stay away, and whatever you do, don't sign anything." The line went dead before I could ask who it was. My knees nearly buckled. Someone out there knew what was happening, and they were risking reaching out to me. I looked around my quiet kitchen, the ticking clock on the wall suddenly louder than ever, my dress hanging neatly pressed in the next room. Tomorrow morning I was supposed to drive to the church, sit proudly in the front pew, and watch my only son marry. Instead, I now faced a choice: walk into what could be a trap, or believe the warnings and run. I stood frozen, phone clutched tight in my hand, torn between love and fear. But then headlights swept across my window, slow, lingering. I rushed to the curtain, heart hammering. A dark sedan idled at the curb, its engine humming low, too still for comfort. My breath caught when the driver lifted a phone, pointing it toward my house as if recording. The car pulled away into the night, leaving me shaking in the shadows of my own home. I whispered aloud, though no one could hear, "If they want war, they'll get it." And for the first time in years, I felt not just fear but fire. The kind of fire that promised revenge, no matter how long it took. But then my cell buzzed again. Another message, colder than the rest: "You weren't supposed to see the papers. Now it's too late. Tomorrow you'll know." My knees went weak, and I gripped the table edge to stay standing. The betrayal was real. The greed was clear. And now the danger was undeniable. I knew tomorrow wouldn't just be a wedding. It would be a battlefield. To anyone watching this, tell me, what would you do if your own child's wedding invitation turned into a death warning? Stay or run? And just as I reached for my car keys, ready to escape into the night, the sound of my front door creaking open stopped me cold. The sound of the door creaking open sent chills crawling across my skin. My first thought was that the sedan I had just seen outside belonged to whoever was now stepping into my home. My second thought was worse. What if it was Ethan? What if my own son had chosen this moment, in the dead of night, to make sure I didn't ruin his wedding plans? My breath quickened, but I forced myself to stay quiet, crouching low by the dining table. The door didn't swing wide, it stopped halfway, as if whoever had pushed it wanted to test whether I was awake. The pause lasted too long, long enough for me to count the hammering beats of my own heart. Finally, the door eased shut again, the click of the latch echoing faintly through the house. Whoever it was hadn't come in, not yet, but they wanted me to know they could. I crept toward the door and checked the lock. It was still intact. No scratches, no forced entry. Just the quiet confirmation that my house wasn't safe anymore, not even with the locks I trusted. I double-bolted it and leaned against the wall, shaking. This wasn't paranoia. The text, the papers, the sedan outside, it was all connected. Someone was circling me, trying to soften me up before the wedding. Sleep was impossible. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, the sky outside bleeding from black to gray. The navy dress I had ironed the night before still hung untouched, mocking me. At 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was Ethan. "Morning, Mom. Don't forget, we need you early at the church. Claire has something she wants you to sign before the ceremony. Just a small thing, but important." My throat burned. He didn't even say good morning, didn't ask how I was, didn't show a shred of warmth. Just a reminder to sign something. I stared at the text, bile rising in my stomach. The greedy motive was no longer hidden. Ethan, my Ethan, was in on it. My hands trembled as I typed back, "I'll be there." I pressed send with a calm I didn't feel, because I needed to know what exactly they planned. But inside, a voice whispered, "Don't go, you've been warned." By the time I reached the church later that morning, my entire body was on edge. The old stone building stood proud against the autumn sky, its stained glass windows glowing with sunlight. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and polished wood. Guests bustled around, laughter echoing off the walls. For a moment, it looked like any other wedding morning, beautiful, full of promise. But I couldn't unsee the darkness beneath it. Every smile looked like a mask, every laugh like a cover for secrets. Claire spotted me before Ethan did. She floated across the aisle in her silk robe, her hair pinned up in perfect curls. On the surface, she looked radiant, every inch the bride. But when her eyes locked on me, her smile tightened into something sharp. "Mrs. Parker," she said sweetly, taking my arm as if we were the closest of friends. "So glad you came. We were afraid, well, never mind." Her grip on my arm was firmer than it needed to be. She steered me toward a small side room off the nave, closing the door behind us. The shift in her tone was instant. "I hope you brought a pen," she said flatly, pulling a stack of papers from her purse. "We need you to sign these before the ceremony starts. It'll keep everything smooth later." I took the papers from her, my eyes scanning the top page. It was the same deed transfer I had seen the night before, only now it bore Ethan's signature at the bottom. My heart cracked in two. He hadn't hesitated, hadn't asked me about it, hadn't even told me. He had already signed away my life's work. I looked up at Claire, my voice shaking but steady. "Do you really think I'm that blind? That stupid?" Her lips curved into a smile that never touched her eyes. "I think you're sentimental. I think you love your son too much to embarrass him on his wedding day. And I think you'll sign, because you know if you don't, you'll be the one who looks selfish. The cruelty in her words made my chest ache. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about erasing me, turning me into nothing but a signature on a line. I pushed the papers back into her hands. Not today, I said. Her smile thinned to a blade. Then don't expect to stay for the ceremony. Guests like you need to know their place. She opened the door and swept out, leaving me standing alone in the little room, shaking with fury. I should have left right then. I should have run. But I wanted answers. I wanted Ethan to look me in the eye and tell me why. So I walked back into the main hall, where the guests were finding their seats. Ethan spotted me near the front, his face breaking into a practiced smile. He hugged me, stiff and formal, the way a stranger might. "Mom," he said too brightly, "Claire said you're giving us trouble about the papers." My throat tightened. Why, Ethan? Why my house? Why now? He glanced around, lowering his voice. "Because we need it, Mom. The down payment on Claire's business, the loans, the future. You're sitting on an asset that's just rotting. You don't need it. We do." His eyes didn't flicker with guilt, only with urgency. The words sliced me open. Rotting. That's what my home, my memories, my sacrifices meant to him. Rot. Claire had twisted him so tightly around her finger that he saw me as an obstacle, not a mother. Before I could answer, an usher stepped up, announcing it was time for the ceremony. Guests rose, music began, and the bride walked down the aisle in a shimmer of lace and pearls. I sat in the front pew, my body stiff, my heart cracking with each step she took toward my son. The vows passed in a blur. I barely heard the promises, the rings, the cheers. My ears were still ringing with the words, "Don't go to the wedding, run." But it was the reception that drove the knife deeper. At the dinner, after the speeches, Claire stood and tapped her glass. "We want to make a special announcement," she said, her smile glowing as she held Ethan's hand. "We've decided to expand our family, not just with love, but with property. Ethan and I will be moving into my dear mother-in-law's house soon, making it our own." Gasps and applause rippled through the crowd, while I sat frozen in my chair, humiliated in front of every guest. Whispers spread like wildfire. People leaned toward each other, glancing at me with pity or confusion. My cheeks burned. My house, announced as theirs, before I had agreed to anything. The betrayal was complete. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping the floor. The room fell silent for a beat, then awkward chatter resumed. I walked quickly toward the exit, my pulse pounding. Behind me, Ethan's voice rose, sharp and irritated. "Mom, don't make a scene." I kept walking, my eyes stinging. But as I reached the coat room, my phone buzzed again. Another message from that same unknown number. "Check the groom's suite. Top drawer. Do it before midnight." My hand trembled as I clutched the phone. Whoever was behind these texts wasn't just warning me, they were guiding me. But guiding me toward what? A trap, or the truth? My chest heaved as I looked back at the glowing reception hall, where my son and his bride laughed with guests who believed their lies. The choice loomed before me, leave and keep my dignity, or go upstairs and uncover whatever secret was waiting in that drawer. I whispered to myself, if they want a war, they've found the wrong mother. And I turned toward the stairs, my feet heavy but determined, each step echoing like a drumbeat toward revelation. But when I opened the door to the suite, what I saw inside left me reeling, my hand flying to my mouth in horror. The suite was dimly lit, heavy curtains drawn against the fading evening light. The air smelled faintly of cologne and champagne, but beneath it lingered something sour, almost metallic. My pulse pounded as I stepped inside, the door shutting softly behind me. The groom's suite, Ethan's sanctuary for the day, looked immaculate at first glance. Jackets hung neatly, shoes polished, ties aligned. But I wasn't here to admire his preparations. My eyes went straight to the desk in the corner, where the top drawer gleamed faintly, left slightly ajar. The message had told me to look there. My hands shook as I pulled it open. Inside lay a folder, its edges frayed from being thumbed through too many times. I hesitated, the thought racing through my mind, what if this was planted to frame me? What if Claire herself had left it, knowing I'd be led here somehow? Still, I couldn't stop. I opened the folder. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and letters, all bearing Ethan's signature alongside Claire's. My breath caught as I scanned the words. Mortgages, loans, property transfers. They were deep in debt, drowning, and the plan was clear. My house, the one asset not yet bled dry, was their lifeline. But worse than the financial schemes were the handwritten notes. Notes in Ethan's handwriting. I recognized the slanted loop of his letters, the way he crossed his T's high, the way his R's curled tight. One note in particular made my stomach drop. Once she signs, move her to assisted living. Sell the place quick before she changes her mind. Assisted living. My throat burned with a mixture of rage and disbelief. They hadn't just wanted my house, they wanted me gone. Locked away, out of sight, erased from their future. The cruelty of it made me shake so violently that I had to grip the desk for balance. But then, another paper slipped free from the folder and fluttered to the ground. I picked it up, my heart hammering. It was a letter, but not from Ethan. The handwriting was unfamiliar, tighter, colder. It was addressed to Claire. The asset must be secured by November. Do not delay. Use the mother if necessary. If she resists, we have other ways. No signature. Just a set of initials, RH. I staggered back, clutching the paper. Who was RH? Someone else was pulling the strings, someone beyond Ethan and Claire. And if they had other ways, what did that mean for me? For my safety? The unknown number, the message to run, the threats, it wasn't paranoia. I was in the middle of something far bigger than I had imagined. A sudden sound behind me made me whirl around. The doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to come in. I shoved the folder back into the drawer, my hands fumbling. My chest heaved as the knob twisted, and in a rush of panic I ducked behind the wardrobe. The door swung open, and Claire's voice floated in, sharp and annoyed. He hasn't come back yet? Useless. We can't afford for him to get cold feet now. Her heels clicked against the floor as she paced. RH will have our heads if this falls apart. The sound of a phone being dialed. My heart raced as she spoke again. Yes, it's me. She hasn't signed yet. Don't worry, she will. Tonight, after the reception. Ethan will convince her if I can't. A pause, then a hiss of irritation. No, she hasn't seen anything. Stop worrying. She ended the call, muttering to herself as she adjusted her dress in the mirror. I held my breath, every muscle aching from stillness, until finally she left, slamming the door behind her. I exhaled shakily, my knees weak. There it was, the confirmation. Someone named RH was involved, and they weren't just greedy, they were dangerous. I knew I couldn't stay silent. But what could I do? If I ran now, they'd twist the story, paint me as delusional, and still find ways to take what was mine. If I confronted Ethan, he'd either deny it or lash out. And if I confronted Claire, she'd bury me under her charm and lies. The reception carried on below, the music swelling, guests laughing, glasses clinking. On the surface, it was a celebration of love. Beneath, it was a battlefield. I slipped out of the suite and made my way down the hallway, the walls closing in around me. My phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Don't confront them yet. Collect proof. There's a hidden account. Bank of Crestwood. Ethan's name. Password is your birthday. I stopped cold in the hall, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles whitened. Whoever this person was, they knew too much, about Ethan, about me. How did they know my birthday, my son's accounts? Fear and suspicion tangled in my chest. But if what they said was true, there was more evidence to uncover, and time was running out. I slipped out of the church into the cool night air, my breath fogging in the autumn chill. The sedan I'd seen the night before was parked across the street again, its windows dark, engine idling faintly. I quickened my pace, heading toward my car, but a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Mark, an old neighbor and friend of Ethan's. He looked uneasy, his tie loosened, his brow furrowed. Mrs. Parker, he whispered urgently. You shouldn't be here. What do you mean? I demanded, my voice cracking. He glanced over his shoulder, then leaned close. Ethan asked me to keep an eye on you. He's worried you'll ruin things tonight. But, look, I don't like what they're planning. Claire's got him wrapped around her finger, and there's money involved. Too much money. If you know what's good for you, get out while you can. I searched his face, desperate for some sign of honesty. "Are you the one texting me?" His eyes widened, and he shook his head quickly. "No. But whoever it is, they're right. You need to protect yourself." He shoved his hands in his pockets and walked off, leaving me trembling on the church steps. The world spun around me. My son. His fiancée. Their debts. This RH shadow looming over us all. And me, caught in the center like a pawn. I drove home in silence, the papers in my mind replaying over and over, each word slicing deeper. Assisted living. Assets secured. Other ways. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I booted up my old laptop, hands clumsy on the keys. I logged into the Bank of Crestwood's portal, entering Ethan's name and hesitantly, my birthday as the password. To my shock, it worked. My screen filled with numbers, account balances, transfers, withdrawals. And then I saw it, a deposit made just last week. $250,000 wired from an offshore account under the name RH. My chest tightened. Someone had paid Ethan and Claire. Paid them to secure my house, my property. I scrolled faster, my eyes wide, until I found notes attached to the transactions. First installment. Remainder upon completion. Completion. That meant me signing away everything, or being forced out another way. The text message was right. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate, backed by someone who wouldn't accept failure. I sat back, my hands shaking, tears pricking my eyes. How had it come to this? My son, my own flesh and blood, selling me off like a piece of property. And yet, somewhere in the chaos of my heartbreak, a cold clarity began to form. I couldn't just survive this. I had to fight back. My mind raced with possibilities. The papers, the bank account, Claire's phone call. Proof was piling up, but I needed more. I needed witnesses, leverage, allies who couldn't be bought. And then I remembered Mark's face, the unease in his voice. He knew more than he'd admitted. He might be the weak link in their chain. If I pressed him, if I made him choose between his conscience and their lies, he could tip the scales. But as I shut my laptop and pulled the curtains tight, headlights flashed across my living room window. A car had pulled into my driveway. I froze, heart thundering. The sedan. The knock at the door was sharp, insistent, rattling the frame. I didn't move, barely breathing. Then a voice cut through the night, muffled but clear. "Mrs. Parker. It's time we talked. Open the door." The voice was male. Calm, steady. Not Ethan, not Mark. I crept closer, peering through the peephole. My blood ran cold. Standing on my porch was a tall man in a dark coat, his hair slicked back, his expression unreadable. And in his hand, he held the same folder I'd found in Ethan's suite. The man on my porch didn't knock again. He simply stood there, perfectly still, as though he had all the time in the world. The folder in his hand looked identical to the one I had rifled through in the groom's suite, and that fact alone made my stomach churn. If he knew I had seen those documents, if he knew I had touched them, then everything I had done tonight was already compromised. I backed away from the door, my breath shallow, but his voice followed me. Calm, deliberate, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "Mrs. Parker, I know you're home. We need to have a conversation. This will go smoother if you let me in." The words slithered through the air like a threat wrapped in velvet. My first instinct was to call the police, but another thought stopped me. If this was RH, and every instinct screamed that it was, then he was powerful enough to make the police back away, or worse, twist the story so that I became the problem. The last thing I needed was to be branded a hysterical old woman meddling in her son's affairs. I crept into the kitchen and grabbed the phone anyway, but my fingers froze on the keypad. A text buzzed across the screen at that exact moment. The unknown number again. "Do not open the door. Record everything. Proof is your weapon." The timing nearly made me drop the phone. Whoever this mysterious ally was, they were watching closer than I realized. My hands trembled as I tapped the record button on the device, setting it face down on the counter, the microphone catching every sound. I forced my voice steady, calling through the door. "Who are you?" A pause, then a low chuckle. "You already know. Let's not pretend. I'm the one who gave your son and his bride the opportunity of a lifetime. But you're standing in the way." My knees nearly buckled. RH. I swallowed hard. If you're looking for money, you've chosen the wrong family. I don't have what you think. Another chuckle. Oh, but you do. You have the house. The land. The one piece of property that isn't sinking under debt. Your son understands this. Claire understands this. Why don't you? The words slammed into me with brutal clarity. They had sold me. Not just betrayed me, not just manipulated me, sold me. And this man wasn't even hiding it. He wanted me to know I was the prize they had put on the table. I steadied my shaking voice. I won't sign anything. Ever. His reply was colder than winter steel. Then you won't get a choice. Tomorrow, Ethan and Claire will bring you what needs to be signed. If you refuse again, you'll be relocated. Quietly. Permanently. And no one will ask questions. The sound of footsteps retreating down the porch echoed through the silence, followed by the growl of an engine as the sedan rolled back into the night. I collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching my phone to my chest. The recording was still running. Proof. My invisible ally was right, this was my weapon. But proof meant nothing unless I had somewhere to take it. Somewhere beyond Ethan and Claire's reach. Somewhere this RH couldn't silence me. The following morning felt unreal. The town looked ordinary, the sky pale blue, the church bells ringing faintly in the distance. But every sound carried menace now, every face seemed like a spy. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned, my chest ached, but adrenaline kept me moving. I called Mark. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight. Mrs. Parker, you shouldn't. I need to see you, I cut him off. Today. Somewhere public. We met at a cafe across from the courthouse, a place busy enough to feel safe. He looked worn, as though the lies he'd been part of were grinding him down. When I slid into the booth, I didn't waste time. I placed my phone on the table, hit play, and let RH's cold threats spill into the air between us. Mark's eyes widened. He ran a hand through his hair. My God. You actually got him on tape. My hands shook as I leaned forward. Help me, Mark. Please. I can't fight them alone. For the first time, guilt softened his face. I should have stopped this sooner. Ethan, he doesn't see what Claire's doing to him. And RH, he's dangerous. He's been circling them for months, offering money, dangling promises. I didn't realize how far it had gone. I swallowed hard. Then stand with me now. If we don't expose them, I'll lose everything. My home, my freedom. Maybe even my life. Mark nodded slowly. We'll need more than just that recording. We'll need the bank records, the contracts, the prenup. Enough to show a judge, enough to make this undeniable. His words ignited a spark of determination deep inside me. For weeks, months even, I had been treated like a burden, like an obstacle to be shoved aside. But now, armed with evidence and a reluctant ally, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, strength. That evening, Mark helped me gather documents from places Ethan and Claire never thought I'd look. Copies of emails. Screenshots from Ethan's laptop, which Mark admitted he had access to from their old study sessions. Even a recording of Claire bragging to her maid of honor about the big payday, once the house was transferred. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. They weren't just planning to take my home, they were in league with RH, funneling money into his failing businesses in exchange for promises of future wealth. I was nothing more than collateral in their scheme. By the time the wedding reception resumed the following weekend for appearances, because Claire insisted on saving face despite the chaos, I was ready. I wore the pale blue dress Ethan once told me looked beautiful on me. My hands trembled, but not with fear this time. With resolve. As guests laughed and toasted, I stood from my seat and tapped my glass. The hall grew quiet, dozens of eyes turning toward me. Claire's smile faltered. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes narrowing. I want to make a toast, I said, my voice steady. But not to the bride and groom. To the truth. Gasps fluttered through the room. I lifted my phone, its speaker already set. RH's voice poured into the silence, every word of his threat captured, undeniable. Murmurs rose into gasps, then into outright shock. Guests leaned toward each other, whispering furiously. Ethan's face drained of color. Claire bolted upright, fury flashing in her eyes. "You don't know what you're doing," she hissed. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied coldly. "I'm showing everyone who you really are." Mark stood then, backing me up. He raised a folder filled with copies of contracts, bank transfers, and incriminating emails. They tried to sell her house to cover their debts. They partnered with a man who threatened her life. This isn't a marriage, it's a scam. The room erupted. Some guests shouted, others demanded answers. Claire tried to grab the phone from my hand, but Ethan caught her wrist, his face twisted in shock and betrayal. "Claire," he choked, "what did you do?" Her mask cracked, desperation bleeding through. "I did it for us, Ethan. For our future. Don't you see?" But he didn't see. He stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, his eyes full of disgust. The confrontation spiraled. Claire screamed, RH's name spilling from her lips in panic. "He'll destroy us if this gets out," she shrieked. But it was too late. Guests were recording on their phones, whispers spreading like wildfire. The truth was no longer confined to my trembling hands. I stood tall, my voice firm despite the chaos. "You wanted to erase me. You wanted me gone. But I'm still here. And now everyone knows." Claire's face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this," she spat. I met her glare with steady eyes. "No, Claire. For the first time, you're the one who will regret." And then the ballroom doors slammed open. Two men in dark suits strode in, their eyes sweeping the chaos, their presence chilling the room into silence. One of them carried a sleek black briefcase. The other scanned the crowd with cold precision. Claire went white as a sheet. Ethan stumbled back. Guests froze. And I knew, without anyone saying a word, that RH had arrived. The ballroom was silent except for the echo of the doors slamming shut. The two men in suits cut a path through the crowd like sharks gliding through water. Guests instinctively pulled back, their once festive chatter now hushed to a terrified murmur. Claire gripped Ethan's arm, her nails digging into him, her whisper sharp with panic. "He sent them. He actually sent them." Ethan shook her off, his face pale and stricken. He looked at me, then at the men, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. The taller of the two men set a sleek black briefcase on the head table, snapping it open with a precision that seemed rehearsed. Inside, neat stacks of documents glinted under the chandelier light. The shorter man pulled out one sheet, thick paper with a red seal stamped at the bottom. "This," he said, his voice like ice, "is the transfer agreement. Mrs. Parker is to sign tonight, in front of witnesses. Once complete, this property will move into trust under the Croft Holdings umbrella." The room gasped. I felt my knees weaken, but I gripped the table to steady myself. "I won't sign a thing," I said firmly. The man's gaze cut to me like a blade. "You misunderstand. This is not a request." The atmosphere cracked under the weight of his words. Claire, instead of denying it, smirked with desperation. "Just do it, Mom," she hissed. "Don't make this harder. It's already done. This is bigger than you. Bigger than me." The words throbbed in my ears, but something inside me hardened. They wanted me silent, erased, replaced by ink on paper. But I wasn't a signature. I wasn't collateral. I was a mother, a widow, a woman who had sacrificed everything for the son who now looked at me with guilt swimming in his eyes. Mark stepped forward, his voice low but strong. "Before you bully her into anything, maybe you should know something." He held up his phone, the screen glowing. "This entire night has been recorded. Every threat, every word. And I've already forwarded it to someone who won't be silenced." The shorter man sneered. "You think the police will protect you? They work with us." Mark shook his head. "Not the police. The press. By tomorrow morning, every major outlet will have a copy of your threats. You try to force her hand now, and the story will spread faster than you can contain it." The crowd rippled with whispers, phones raised higher, recording every second. The men exchanged a glance. For the first time, doubt flickered across their carefully blank faces. I straightened my back and met their cold stares. "You underestimated me. You thought an old woman would be easy to silence. But the truth is louder than you think." The taller man closed the briefcase with a snap, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he said softly. a warning more chilling than a shout. With that, they turned and strode from the ballroom, leaving a wake of terrified silence in their path. Claire collapsed into a chair, her mask crumbling completely. "You ruined everything," she spat at me, her voice shrill. "Do you know what he'll do now? We're finished. We're all finished." Ethan stood motionless, his face pale and twisted. He looked at Claire with a mixture of horror and disgust, as though finally seeing her for what she was. "You used me," he whispered. "You used all of us." She turned on him, desperate. "I did it for us. For the life we could have had. Don't you understand? Without me, you're nothing." He flinched, as though struck. Slowly, painfully, he stepped back. "Then I'd rather be nothing than what you've turned me into." The words hung heavy in the air. Claire's shoulders sagged, her fury melting into desperation. She lunged toward him, but security, alerted by the chaos, swept in and held her back. Guests murmured, phones captured every angle, the spectacle now far beyond her control. I walked past her, my heart pounding but steady. For months I had been the one forced into silence, treated like a relic, dismissed as irrelevant. Now it was Claire who was caged by the truth, every mask stripped away in front of the people she had worked so hard to impress. Outside the ballroom, the cool night air hit me like a blessing. Mark joined me, his expression weary but resolute. "You did it," he said quietly. "You turned the tables." I shook my head. "No. The truth did. All I did was refuse to bow." The days that followed were a storm. News outlets picked up the story, running with the recordings and the evidence Mark had provided. Headlines blared, bride's family caught in inheritance scheme, local woman targeted in multi-million-dollar property fraud. Social media roasted Claire, her crocodile tears from the reception turned into memes, her name synonymous with greed and betrayal. As for RH, whispers spread that his empire was already crumbling under scrutiny. Investigations bloomed overnight, creditors circling like vultures. The man who had stood untouchable for years was suddenly dragged into the light. Ethan, broken and ashamed, came to me days later. He stood on my porch, his once proud posture crumpled into something smaller, humbler. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "I don't know how to ask for forgiveness. I was blind. I was stupid. And I don't deserve your kindness, not after what I did." I studied his face, the boy I had raised now hollowed by the weight of his mistakes. My heart ached, but not with anger anymore, with sorrow. "You let greed blind you, Ethan. You forgot who you were raised to be. But you're still my son. That doesn't vanish because of one betrayal. What matters is what you do now." Tears glistened in his eyes. For the first time in months, I believed they were real. Claire vanished, her name whispered only in scandal. The house remained mine, not because of stubbornness but because I refused to let betrayal steal what decades of sacrifice had built. The community that once pitted me now looked at me differently, not as fragile, but as fierce. And in quiet moments, I felt Robert's presence, as though he were reminding me that strength had always been mine to claim. Looking back, the unknown text that started it all feels less like a warning and more like a gift. A hand reaching through the dark, urging me to stand, to see what I had ignored for too long. "Don't go to the wedding, run. Whoever sent it may never reveal themselves, but I will always be grateful. It saved me from losing everything, my home, my dignity, even my life. And it left me with a truth I'll carry forever. Betrayal doesn't destroy you unless you let it. Sometimes, it's the spark that forces you to find your voice, your strength, your power again." So to you listening now, I'll ask, what would you do if the people you trusted most tried to sell your life out from under you? Would you stay silent, or would you fight back?